Today I'm going to be reviewing this Angseen upgraded high-power battery-powered mini chainsaw that I recently purchased on Amazon. Now, this one is going to only weigh 1.8 pounds, so about 2 pounds. I'll show you here in a minute. I'll kind of look at it and see how that weight handles in regards to actually cutting with it. This does also come with 2 batteries, so it's going to come with 2 amp hour batteries, and then it comes with the chainsaw and everything as well. So I'm going to go and open this up, show you exactly what you're going to get inside. Then I'm going to test it out on some actual logs. Now, the first thing that I did want to mention is this actually comes in a little carrying case, so that's going to be pretty nice. So that's going to be a nice feature. You can just put it right back inside of there. This is going to be a relatively small chainsaw, so this would be really good for like trimming limbs, low-hanging limbs off a tree, rather than using like loppers or something like that. Being how small this is, I probably wouldn't use it on like trying to cut off big limbs or trying to chop up big logs or anything like that. Like, it's just not going to be big enough for that. But this is going to be a pretty good size. Heft-wise, it's not actually too terribly bad. So that 2 pounds is pretty nice there on that. And then as you can see, it's going to come with the 2 batteries, going to come with the charger, going to come with a pair of gloves. It is also going to come with an extra chain, so that's also a really nice feature. I didn't realize that was included. And then a pair of glasses that you can wear while using this chainsaw. Now, one thing to consider, even though it is going to be a battery powered chainsaw, you will still need to put oil in it, like chainsaw oil or bar chain oil. So that's going to be that little hole right there on top. So let me go ahead and grab some of that, pour that in there, and then I'll test this out. Now, reading through the instructions here, this has a little bubble on it, almost like a primer would on like that gas start. And I wasn't really sure what this primer bulb was, so I read through the operator's manual, and you actually have to continually push on this to get the oil to come out and go onto the chain. So while you are actively using this, you also do have to push on this bubble. So they recommend like you do it like 8 or 10 times when you're first doing it, just to like prime the oil and to get it to go out. And then when you're actively using it, like they recommend you push this every 8 or every 10 seconds or so. So that's really a pretty big downside in my opinion. Like, you've got a chainsaw and you're not going to make it where it automatically lubricates like every other chainsaw. Like, you have to manually push this bubble every single time you need to put out oil. So I feel like that's a pretty big downside to this model. Like, it's great, like it's way better than using like a pair of loppers or something, and then they make it worse by adding it where you have to manually push in the bubble like every single time that you're using it. So not a huge fan of that. Now, usage wise, this does have a lock and an unlock. So to unlock, you're just gonna have to hold this. It is spring loaded, so you have to hold this while you push in on this. And you can see it is going to turn like that. And then so not only do you have to hold in on this, push in on this, but then you also have to push the bubble at the top every 10 seconds. Again, it's like it adds one extra step that you shouldn't have to add to this. And so I'm really just not a fan of this bubble here on top, as I really feel like every 10 seconds you're gonna have to stop, push in on this, and then be able to hold that in to be able to cut. But let's see how well it cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and take off this limb here that's going up sideways on this tree. This is a relatively good size one, especially in regards to how big this chainsaw is. So let's see how well it can handle this one. Now, as you can see, it did handle cutting through, and that's going to be a pretty good one. It did bind up there a little bit just because of the angle that I was trying to cut it at. So if you're trying to, go up against something else, it is going to bind pretty good there, just because it doesn't have a ton of torque behind it. So that's going to be pretty good. And then obviously, then you have to press on this to re-oil the chain after pretty much every limb you cut off. But I was able to cut off a pretty good sized limb with this. So this will definitely be a lot nicer than having to use a handsaw or, break up the big chainsaw when just, trimming up some smaller limbs. So this should work well for that. Again, when you're up and close to the trunk though, like this, when it's something big like this, it is going to be pretty difficult just because it's going to bind up. Like, you're going to get in about that far, and then it's going to start to bind. It's the issue. But even though it slowed down, I still was able to cut it off relatively even with the edge of the tree. So overall, definitely pretty happy with it. Man, I just wish they wouldn't have done that with the oil. They take that away, and really this is the ultimate little mini chainsaw that'll work great. Now, these are going to be really small where the chains actually are. So the actual like parts of the chain on there, they're going to be pretty small. So just something to keep in mind. You have to make sure, of course, that you keep them sharp and that sort of a deal. Since they are going to be so small, they're not going to make as big of chunks of wood when you're going through and cut it. But overall, definitely this is a pretty decent chainsaw from Angseen. One last thing I did want to mention about the case. The case is small enough where you actually can't leave the battery connected to it and still be able to fit it inside of the case. So you're going to have to actually take the battery off, put the battery back into its little slot up there, and then you can then close the case and use it. So if you're going to be using it like that, you do have to disconnect the battery every single time. Not the end of the world, but something you want to keep in mind.